This is J.E. Mooney, the author of The Siren of Good Intentions and a few more books to come. And I have to tell you, this is so booking cool. I can't wait for you all to see more. Thanks, Jewel.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. It's Jewel B. Today's guest is a writer and author. His debut novel, Siren of Good Intentions, includes themes of adventure, romance, and fantasy, and is based on actual events in West Africa during the 70s. He is J.E. Mooney. So J.E. Mooney, of course, that is your pen name. Welcome to So Booking Cool. We understand that you go by Ted.
Thanks, Jill. It's great to be here. And yes, I blame my parents for that. My real name is John Edward, and I just wanted to be Ted all my life because that's what they called me. So I get mixed up sometimes myself.
Right. And speaking of getting mixed up, I understand that you actually shared with me that there is another author who also has J.E. because it's a great name, but you guys were able to work that situation out. Tell us more about that, Ted.
Yeah, so I think what it is that the Mooney tradition is one of storytelling, and there is another author named Ted Mooney and another author named J.E. Mooney apparently on Goodreads. And so my novel on Goodreads was originally confused with his site there, but Goodreads people were did a great job. They set me up with my own author profile and such, and the Siren of Good Intentions is now there with my author profile.
And what is that like? Did you feel like as an author, you had to make sure that you had a Goodreads profile? And how long were you aware of Goodreads?
And so I've known of Goodreads for about 2 years now, and I've actually had a person recommended to me when I told him I was looking for, say, adventure novel, or in particular, I was looking for literary novels.
Mm-hmm.
And he recommended Goodreads to me. I hadn't been on it. And then as I became an author and I joined the Florida Writers Association here, a number of people told me about it, and including the woman who helped me publish the book. They said it's really one of the best places for your books to get noticed. The people there are serious readers. There are lots of them. And you can get some good feedback if people, take it to heart. So I was excited to finally get it done and squared away.
All right. And speaking of the woman who helped you publish the book, Ted, what is her name?
So Fran Kaiser. Fran Kaiser is a self-publishing consultant here in St. Augustine, Florida, and she is an outstanding technician, and she knows everybody in the book publishing world here in Florida, as it turns out. She turned me on to a number of excellent copy and content editors who really helped me navigate through the editing of my book, which was a bigger task than I had imagined, probably because I thought I was a better first drafter than I imagined.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Why did you feel like you were a better first drafter?
I fell in love with my own writing. Finally, after many, many years of really thinking I really needed a lot more to hone and craft. But I really understood more from these copy editors of how to not just fine tune, but to say more in fewer words, which is extremely helpful. And taking a leaf out of Stephen King's books on writing, really getting rid of the adverbs and all the unnecessary modifiers to let the action and the place speak for itself.
That's real. That's real, Ted.
Yeah.
I think when a lot of writers hear that, they're going to be able to definitely connect with what you just said.
Yeah, I think so. It's certainly helped me a great deal, and my writing's improved tremendously for it. And I'm applying that to my upcoming novels as well.
Mm-hmm. And you also studied English literature.
I did study English literature. It's my first undergraduate degree, and I loved it, but I didn't study it looking for a vocation when I left college, which was probably an oversight on my part, because I got out of college not knowing or not finding really what I wanted to do until I joined the Peace Corps.
Oh, right. Yes, because you also, guys, Ted has a background like in working up top, like in terms of the Peace Corps. So tell us about your transition from studying English. What were some of the goals you had when you pursued it as an undergraduate degree? And then, yes, your transition into being abroad and working abroad in the Peace Corps.
Yeah, so that was really an interesting time for me because I was unsure at the end of my English career, English studies. But what I did when I transitioned from an early freshman selection of economics to selecting English literature for my final 3 years, I felt liberated. Not only was I liberated in the sense that my spirit was exploring, I felt that I could travel and through all kinds of things through literature. I studied a number of writers that I really came to admire, and I also fell in with some people who were storytellers, poets and storytellers, and that helped me start to really think that this is a great place to be, hanging out with these people, writing my own stories, writing my own poems and things like that. Of course, when I graduated, at that point, my choices seemed a bit limited. I could go into insurance sales. I got some opportunities to apply to law schools, none of which appealed to me. I ended up teaching English after taking some educational credits. I was a student teacher for a while, and then I made a very positive decision. I realized that if I really wanted to be the writer that I had dreamed to be, I needed more experience, not just writing, but I needed more world experience, things on which I could draw and for stories to tell. And that drove me in the direction of wanting to travel overseas, use my language courses. I studied French through high school and college, had no opportunity, more or less in the United States to speak French or to actually perfect it. So joining the Peace Corps and being sent over to West Africa was as positive a move as I could have hoped for at that time. And then what happened after that is I realized it wasn't just an adventure. There was really good work to be done too. So that's why I ended up staying there after my Peace Corps service as well.
And in your bio, Ted, you say that I've been at various times a teacher, a Peace Corps volunteer, an engineer, a sales manager, a business executive, a Peace Corps country director, and a senior director for a technology nonprofit, which is like, wow, you've done a lot of things. And you say, all of this uniquely qualifies me for absolutely nothing, but it sure has been an interesting ride. So I want to know why you feel that way in terms of the unique qualifications part, and how has this ride been interesting to you?
Yeah, so my friends that I reinvent myself every 5 to 8 years, and that's more or less what I've done. Sometimes by design, sometimes by circumstance. But I've made all of these changes based on either opportunities or in some cases very positive decisions on my part. When I'm saying that it doesn't uniquely qualify me for anything, I'm always reminded of Malcolm Gladwell's dictum, or at least his own research, that says you need to spend 10,000 hours doing something if you want to get really good at it. And I know a lot of people who spent, long careers doing one thing, doing it really well, whether you're a musician, a writer, a business person, a scientist, an engineer. All of those things require some long-term dedication. My long-term dedication extended about 5 to 7 years. And maybe it's classic ADD, I don't know, but in any case, what I did discover, though, is that I had this desire to explore, to really look at new things, find new things, and incorporate them into my knowledge bank, or my storytelling, if you will. So that when I say it uniquely qualifies me for absolutely nothing, that may be a misnomer. It may be that it qualifies me to be a good storyteller because it has given me a breadth of experience from which to draw.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. We hear so often. Well, I know that I've heard often that to be a writer, don't even just write. Make sure that you're living life and you're having experiences. But at the same time, as you said, to Malcolm Gladwell's point, putting in that work, the 10,000 hours and stuff to a craft. So, Ted, how do you think you can balance the two?
Well, it was funny because I started writing Siren of Good Intentions back in 2007 now. Uh, so it's been a long ride, but I've put a lot of time into writing it. And I had, before that, as I was pursuing these other various careers in either technology or as a Peace Corps country director, I was trying my writing and other things. I really didn't like my writing, but I was continuing to practice. I knew how I didn't want to write. So I've been applying myself now, writing every day, something or another. If I'm competing, I want to write short stories, more for the practice and for the skills that it's going to hopefully instill in me, and for the opportunity for feedback. What's important to me also as a writer is not simply that I write. I don't want to write in a vacuum. I want to write so that I can have these stories and these points of interest, these things that I'm hoping to do with words um, and novels, appreciated, read and liked, and hopefully people will want more.
You started writing The Siren of Good Intentions, as you mentioned over. Oh, well, is it still a decade ago, Ted?
It's over a decade ago, 2007. So that's
yeah.
it'll be 13
Oh,
years.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, over a decade ago, which I think it's fantastic that you still decided to commit to it, you know?
Yeah, so I did commit to it because I think, from the beginning, I've said I've always wanted to be a writer, even though I'm also an engineer. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I was an engineer for a long time, and I did some other things in the technology field. But I always did want to write. But if I have to say one thing that really helped push me to completion, to making the investment in the professional editing and getting it published, I have to say that credit belongs to my wife.
Oh,
It really does. No,
yeah, tell us more.
Okay, yeah. So she and I met while I was a country director in the Peace Corps. She was back here in the United States. When she came over to visit me in Uganda, where I was at the time, she said that she would go ahead and she would read my manuscript, which she was nervous about because, here is this man she's just getting to know. She doesn't really know if he's a good writer or not, although we did correspond, which was a lot of fun for a long time. And when she read it, she said, "Oh my God, this is a screenplay. This is a movie." And so while she had her own criticisms of it, it was very raw writing at the time. She nevertheless loved the story and loved a lot of some of the writing. In fact, a lot of the writing. And she kept pushing me, first of all, to finish it, because when she read it, it was still 3/4 of a novel. And then once I had a completed manuscript, to get that completed manuscript really professionally edited, making the hard choices about what to take out, really letting people tear your writing apart at some point, right?
Right.
And she helped, she gave me the motivation to continue and the courage to get my baby all redressed, if you will.
Wow, that is amazing. So did that make your relationship stronger? Like for you, did it say this is really something here? The fact that you were able to show her the manuscript, like did it just take your relationship to another level?
Well, yeah, it absolutely did. I mean, the fact that one, she overcame her fear of like, oh my God, what if I don't like it? How do I talk to them about it? Two, I need to talk to you about this. You've got something here that's special, that I really relate to. And can I be on this journey with you? And I went, heck yeah, that's a great thing. So it did. It really, it helped solidify our relationship. And We were married, I think, less than 2 years later. She's still my
Congrats.
partner now in the writing. When I say that, she's my first go-to. I've let her read my unfinished manuscripts of my other two works right now, and she's been extremely helpful. She's more grounded than I am. I'm the ethereal, imaginative, crazy guy, and she's the real world pragmatic strategist. And we mesh. We complement each other so well.
You guys are a dynamic duo, great team.
Yeah, we're a team. That's exactly right.
So you have to tell us, Ted, tell us about the Siren of Good Intentions and how you came up with the characters Doria, Nigel, and Victor.
Okay, so the Siren of Good Intentions starts as a story about what I did after I got a Peace Corps back in 1978. I stayed in West Africa, and I took a job being responsible for getting groups of scientists in and out of this area of West Africa alive and productive. I was to help them make sure that they didn't get sick while they were deep in the bush, or that they were nourished and they had the kinds of help that they needed in order to get their work done. So that was my job for 2 years. So the novel starts off based on that, but it's also based upon some of the just crazy things that happened. And then when I met who are in the book, Doria and Nigel, I actually met a British couple like that. And what I preface my book by saying that in an alternative universe, this is what would have happened when I was in those circumstances. And so the characters are developed by me, but they're based on people that I met or people in the circumstances that when we were in there. So, and I'll admit this right now, I had a crush on this guy while I was there.
You had a crush on who?
That helps drive the fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm. Wait, so who did you have the crush on, Ted?
I had a crush on Doria.
Doria, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Not her real name. And a different character altogether.
Oh, I see.
So, but those are the things that drove the book itself, was that experience of mine driving into the bush and fantasizing about what could have been a relationship with an amazing, vivacious, and powerful woman.
Wow.
And one of the things I wanted to do in the novel, and once I landed on the idea of developing Doria Blake as a character, and I think this is true in my next two novels as well, is that I'm drawn to strong women. And I really wanted to show how I perceived a strong woman to develop, particularly back decades ago when more women were still operating in a married life in the shadow of their husbands, and how they can emerge on their own right, which is a compelling story. I mean, it goes back to Flaubert and who wrote Hedda Gabler, I can't remember right now, the playwright, Swedish playwright. But I mean, the idea of a strong woman emerging from either a loveless marriage or something that is otherwise subjugating her, I think is a powerful story. And I wanted to try and tell it as a man, but I also wanted to explore really what did she feel like. So there's a whole section in the Siren of Good Intentions that's told in Doria's first-person voice. And that was a real going out on a limb for me, of course. And I wanted to see, I had to have it read by a number of women to tell me, was this an authentic woman's voice? Did you hear me as a man trying to fake it? Or were you really hearing Doria Blake's voice? And I'm happy to say that my women readers, and I've had a number of them, are really were very positive and helped me develop that voice authentically.
Wow, okay. I'm glad that you shared that, because I was going to ask, what was your process for trying to develop Doria's voice and making sure? So what were examples of the feedback that you got from the numerous women who you showed
Yeah.
Doria to?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, language. Language was an important use, and language, and I think cadence in the
Mm,
way a woman might talk to herself. Because of course it's first person, so it's not all dialogue. A lot of it is description, a lot of it is thinking, a lot of it is, questioning of self, that kind of thing. And I wanted her to be able to talk about her perceptions of her own vulnerabilities
mhm,
and insecurities, and how she addresses them both internally and externally, what decisions and actions that she takes in order to continue that drive. So it's that's a lot of what so the feedback I got from not only my wife, but there are 4 other women. One is a wife of a very good friend of mine who was also in Africa with me. My 2 content editors, and another very good friend who was willing to put in the time. Again, a lot of those people, because we were friends, they were nervous. But when they emerged from the readings, they were all highly complimentary and willing to give me critical feedback. So not just being complimentary, but they were no longer afraid that it was awful. What they really want to do is give me their sort of unvarnished opinion of how I could make this more a voice that a woman would recognize as her own, or as possibly being her own.
mhm. Okay. And for people who haven't yet read Siren of Good Intentions, what do you want them to take from this story? Like, for those who have not read it, what are they missing out on, Ted?
They're missing out on a great adventure, a lot of fun. I mean, it's on its basic level, it's an adventure romance. And it's got some magic and fantasy as you get further and further into it. So I want them to have a great sense of, this is a place that I have been transported to, and it's a wonderful read. Um, and what more could you want from a good book, really? Um, at some point, there are other levels on which I think the book works. Certainly, I've tried to put some of these things into it. And if people get those other things out of it, that would be fantastic. So I used symbolism throughout. Birds in particular are a particular interest of mine, and I've used them in various ways from the very first chapter all the way through, to indicate some things about either the future, as in foretelling, or in reference to deeper psychological interactions that are going on, that sort of thing. But basically, it's a fun adventure romance.
That's really awesome. Are there adventure romances that you are a fan of?
Um, Interesting. So more on the big screen than in literature.
Hmm.
If I adventure romances, my wife always compared the book to Romancing the Stone. But
Oh.
I think that the great adventures that I read about, which took place in Africa, there's like I'm trying to remember the one about there's one also about an Australian couple in the bush who have so the short answer is I can't reference them as readily as I would like. But I have to say that I've been drawn to those kinds of adventure novels, particularly those that took place much earlier than even the Siren of Good Intentions, like in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Those
Hmm.
kinds of stories.
Okay.
I'm
Is
not
there
talking about Tarzan. Sorry.
not to and speaking of movies, because you did mention that word, is there anybody who comes to mind who you could see portraying Doria, Nigel, and or Victor on the big screen?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I, of course, what author doesn't fantasize about having his or her book made into a movie?
Mm.
So I've thought about that. I originally thought of Kate Blanchett as playing Doria, and then I
Ooh.
thought of the actress who plays in the of the Werewolf and Vampire series, um, a British actress, of course, and I can't
It's
remember her name now, which
it's
is
not Kate Beckinsale, right?
Kate Beckinsale. Thank you so much, Kate
Oh,
Beckinsale.
that's right. Kate
Well
Beckinsale.
done. Yes. So
Yeah.
Kate Beckinsale would be wonderful playing Doria as an. Those are a couple of playing Victor. You know, since that's sort of that's the surrogate me. I
Mhm.
don't. I probably flatter myself too much to pick like Ryan Reynolds or
Hey, why
someone.
not?
But you know, I I would. So were I so fortunate to have my book turned into a screenplay that someone actually wanted to produce, I'd put that into the hands of the experts. Quite honestly,
Okay.
what I want to
Mhm.
do is I want the story to remain intact more than anything else,
Mhm.
because I think it's a great story worth telling, and it goes to a place in some really I think interesting and engaging detail that helps people transport themselves to this time and the exoticism and in some cases brutality of a very difficult place to live.
Right. And Ted, I also have to know, and the listeners would love to know as well, why is helping in the development of other countries, why was that something that was important to you?
So originally it wasn't. When I joined the Peace Corps, it was more about my getting my worldly experience, my putting myself on the line when I was still in my physical prime kind of thing.
Mm.
But while I was there, as a volunteer, living in a mud brick hut on the edge of the Sahara Desert in the north of Senegal, I came to realize how much good a liberal arts major from the United States can do in just interacting with these people and sharing perspectives. And it became clear to me that there was a lot more that could be done um, on all kinds of levels, on the local levels, on the country levels, and on the continental levels. And so I became extremely interested in that ability of us who have been so lucky and fortunate, some would say privileged, to live and be born and raised in the United States, and to be able to give back to the, the people who are suffering from very, very different circumstances. One of the things I learned early on is that uh, genius can be found anywhere and is found everywhere. And how genius emerges sometimes depends upon the circumstances that allow it to emerge or that
Mm.
encourage it. And there was so little of that going on in some of these remote villages that I felt that there had to be a way to liberate the brain power and the perspectives of these people, not just so that they could get more running water or develop technology, but really to blossom and give to the world some of the perspective they have on why their own culture flourishes and has survived for thousands of years the way it has. Um, and I kept that even when I came back to the United States. One of the reasons I did, I got a technical degree, is because I wanted to have a skill, a real skill that I could use to help people of developing nations. And I went back to Guinea uh, as an engineer in the 80s,
Mhm.
and I helped build a technical university that was in 3 city locations in the heart of Guinea, which was another experience all by itself. So I did some of that, and then eventually, after I had done a number of other things in technology, rejoined the Peace Corps at that point as a country director to lead the programs and to mentor and counsel the volunteers in particular, and to find the people in those countries, those organizations, and people who were really wanted to find the help that they needed. They wanted to improve the living conditions on all levels of their community. And that's just such a great thing, and it's so rewarding. So that was really what how it evolved.
Wow. And if I say so myself, I really like what you said. Genius can be found anywhere.
Yeah, thanks. But I discovered that. That's what I think drove me, finding these really some of these people in these villages in Africa. Every speaks like 4 different languages, depending on what area of and what country in Africa you are. But their facility with language is mind-boggling. And I don't think that we have a true appreciation of what that is, and how those synapses all connect, and what that means for the development of their brains. I was just in awe on some of the things I learned in the village, and those people who will tell you that I got more than I gave during my volunteer service.
Oh. You know, Ted, what advice do you have for both the young and mature writers? And is it basically the same advice, or are there any unique pieces that you have for authors?
You know, I don't know that I am the right person to be giving advice to writers, but I have.
Why do you say that?
Have known a lot of different writers, and people write for different reasons. You know, I was at a book festival sitting next to an author, great guy. We're very good friends now. We correspond a lot. He writes zombie novels, and he's written 2 zombie series, in fact. That's not something I'm looking to undertake, or I couldn't advise him at all. I know how he would write, or what he would write about, or the things that will make him successful. What I can say is that if you want to be a writer, write, and don't stop. Write and get criticism and feedback. Don't be afraid of what some might, or you might even look at yourself as failure, because there really isn't any such thing. There's only continuing to try and continuing to learn and get better and better. So one of the things that I've done that has been really helpful to me is seek out my peers in local writing groups and writing associations. I'm learning as much as I can about the craft. And don't forget to keep that mind and heart open for all these experiences to give you that wealth of resource from which to write great stories.
What are some examples of keeping your mind and your heart open when it comes to?
Wow, okay. So I think one of the we start with your mind, and I think one of the things that we lose sight of in certainly this politicized America we're living right now is that there are legitimate, smart, well-meaning people who have completely differing views on the politics. And I think instead of having a war with people with whom we disagree, we need to be listening to those people with whom we disagree. We need to be listening and turning it over and weighing against the things that we believe and what our values are, and challenging ourselves in that way. From an open heart standpoint, I think, you know, I've learned that you can be friends with people from all kinds of different places, and the people who are honest with you and with whom you're honest, the people who are compassionate about others, these are the people who have open hearts, and they are worth knowing. And I don't care what village they've come from or whether they've gone to school or not. Those are great qualities in individuals and are worth cultivating.
Wow, that is so well said. What are you going to take? What have you been applying from writing Siren of Good Intentions to the novels that you're currently writing?
Yeah, so I have learned a lot. I've learned how to be much more concise, as I was telling you earlier, to say more with fewer words.
Right.
I still have a bit of a desire to do a flourish. I love a sentence flourish of a few kinds. So, but I'm learning to tame that instinct so that it is much it's much more skilled and moves the story along faster. So I think that one of the things that I learned early on in writing the Siren of Good Intentions, certainly with the feedback, is the importance of developing characters of all kinds. So trying to explore characters with whom I'm not necessarily familiar, and not being afraid of stereotypes, but not giving into them at the same time. So because stereotypes become that for a reason. On the other hand, they aren't as interesting as, say, these other creatures that we might encounter that are still human but are unrecognizable as such in so many ways. So I've tried to come to terms with that, creating a depth of character that is dissimilar to, say, my own experience. And I think keeping the pace even faster. One of the things that a friend of mine who read the book said, "Whoa, this is happening too fast. Things just happen one right after another." So, and when I say it's not always about action, it's always about the character development as well. So what helps develop character, or more accurately, I guess, reveal character? It's developed through the story, but the character is the character, and that be revealed in various ways throughout the storytelling. And so trying to get to those things that help reveal those character. I think the last thing that I'm taking to heart that I learned along the way and incorporated it into the Siren later on, after I had my manuscript almost complete, is make sure you have a great antagonist. So the protagonists are great, they're sympathetic, and they're flawed, and they're heroic, and they're all these things, but what makes a great antagonist? And sometimes it's not just an individual or a group of individuals, sometimes it's the place, or sometimes it's the system, or something else, but really having a developed antagonist. So those are some of the things that I'm incorporating into my next few novels.
J.E. Mooney, everyone. J.E. Mooney, aka Ted.
Yes.
It was such a pleasure talking with you today. I really appreciate your time and your support. Let everyone know how they can keep up with you and how they can get Siren of Good Intentions.
I sure will. Thanks, Jewel. This has been great for me. I've really enjoyed this opportunity. You can reach me on my website. It's www.jemooney.com. I've got a Facebook site, J.E. Mooney author, and my books are on Amazon right now in both digital, paperback, and hardback. They're not yet in bookstores. I'm hoping they will be there shortly. Ingram Sparks is publishing my hardcover as we speak. So I'm
awesome.
So I'm off to the races. I'm doing some book signings here in Florida.
Yes.
I'm going to be in some conventions and book festivals in the near and medium term future this year in Atlanta, Washington D.C., Wisconsin, and Seattle.
Awesome.
Stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned, guys. Make sure you keep up with J.E. Mooney. That information about your upcoming appearances, is that on your website as well?
The near-term ones are, and the longer-term ones will be up there shortly.
Okay.
And then they'll be on my website this week.
All right. Great. And yes, thank you again to all the listeners. And until next time, so booking cool.
So booking cool.
Yeah.